Welcome to the Jenna Ellis Show, sponsored by Legacy Precious Metals. There has never been a better time to invest in precious metals. Visit legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com. Good evening and welcome to Jenna Ellis Tonight. As the conflict rages on in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, and campuses across the country here on the home front are erupting in their own pro-Hamas and anti-Israel protests. This headline is coming from Newsmax. The ICC is moving to indict Benjamin Netanyahu, Israeli leaders, for war crimes. The International Criminal Court, or the ICC, is preparing arrest warrants for senior Israeli officials for alleged war crimes, including Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, a revelation that has drawn silence, if not acceptance, from the Biden administration. Sources told the New York Times the charges stem from Israel preventing delivery of humanitarian aid, which Israeli officials have said they fear just winds up in the hands of Hamas terrorists amid the war started by Hamas's October 7th terrorist attacks. Netanyahu reportedly is on the list of Israeli government officials to be issued ICC arrest warrants. So that also coming as the Biden administration State Department has found that Israel is potentially guilty of war crimes. And this is what a State Department spokesperson had to say yesterday.
What I can say in terms of where the process is right now is that after a careful process, we found 5 Israeli units responsible for individual incidents of gross violations of human rights. All of these were incidents much before October 7th, and none took place in Gaza. 4 of these units have effectively remediated these violations, which is what we expect partners to do. It is consistent with what we expect all countries whom we have a security relationship with. For a remaining unit, we continue to be in consultations and engagements with the government of Israel. They have submitted additional information as it pertains to that unit, and we're continuing to have those conversations.
Joining me now is Michael Donnelly, who is an attorney and a law professor and has litigated in international courts and forums. So, Mike, I think that this headline about the ICC was really confusing to a lot of people of how exactly an international criminal court would have jurisdiction to begin with to even issue some kind of indictment or arrest warrant of a prime minister of Israel and other Israeli leaders as the conflict is ongoing. So what should people know about the ICC?
Well, the ICC, Jenna, is about 22 years old. It began in around 2002. About 123 countries came together and signed the treaty, which is known as the Rome Statute, to codify its authority to prosecute war crimes, genocide, war crimes against humanity, and a new crime called the crime of aggression. And this is a laundry list of crimes that are very serious. When you think about the history of war crimes, it really started back when the United States tried the Nazis and the Japanese in the aftermath of World War II. And it was the United States saying, you know what, we won this war, but we're not going to come in and abandon the rule of law. We're going to come in and use justice and due process procedures to make sure that those who are truly guilty of these heinous, horrendous crimes which resulted in the deaths and atrocities perpetrated against hundreds of thousands and millions of people are held to account. Israel up to this point, it appears to me from what I've seen of the news, is acting with great restraint, is doing everything it can to ensure that the civilian populations are not unduly harmed or targeted. In war, bad things happen. I fought in a war, and so bad things can happen. And yes, when unlawful orders are given or people are guilty of committing atrocities, they should be held to account. But, right now Israel is defending itself. It should be able to defend itself. And I'm not sure that this report is accurate. I will tell you, I know a lot of people are tweeting about it, but I've looked at it. It looks like it appears from a New York Times report. and it may be attributed to Israeli officials who are expressing some concern. So I have some questions about whether arrest warrants actually are being prepared. There's a process the ICC follows. It receives reports, it investigates, there's an office of the prosecutor, then it goes through a pretrial procedure where it then evaluates whether arrest warrants should even be issued. It seems to me premature to be talking about arrest warrants and atrocities. Has this even been investigated? It doesn't appear to me that time has even been enough time to allow for a proper investigation to take place.
Yeah, I mean, that would make a lot of sense that, when we're talking about former ICC cases, this is well after the fact, and yet this is right in the middle of the conflict. But assuming that there is some substance to this story, and whether it's an ongoing investigation or an indictment and arrest is soon pending, how would the International Criminal Court even have jurisdiction over Benjamin Netanyahu and Israeli leaders to begin with?
Well, so the theory is this. Israel is not a party to the treaty. The United States is not a party. China, India, Russia are not parties. It's interesting. I think the United States and Israel both signed it, but then withdrew their signatures. Russia, I believe, did the same. China and India, I don't think ever signed it. So the theory is this. When a party, and Israel's not a party, commits a war crime or a crime against humanity, how can they be under the jurisdiction of a court to which they have not signed up? Because the idea of the rule of law under international law is that states are only subject to agreements that they sign. But in this case, the Rome Statute sets out that if a non-party commits a crime in a state of a party, then they can be investigated and potentially prosecuted. And so in this case, Palestine was admitted to the ICC in 2015. Now, a lot of people have said that Palestine should never have been admitted to the ICC because Palestine is not a state. There is no state of Palestine. And that's something that people are arguing about, whether there even should be one. But that's the theory of exercising jurisdiction over Benjamin Netanyahu, because he is allegedly ordering acts which are occurring in Palestine to affect the Palestinians.
So basically, because allegedly Israel is committing crimes against Palestine, which is a signatory, then that would be some kind of backdoor jurisdiction because they're a victim in this instance. I mean, is that the prevailing theory?
That is it. That is the theory. Yes, that is exactly what
Wow.
the statute provides for.
Well, and we have to take a hard break here, but I'm going to keep Mike Donnelly into the next segment because there's a lot more to talk about with the ICC, the rule of law, and does this erode national sovereignty? I think so. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. I'm continuing my conversation with Mike Donnelly, who is an attorney and a professor of law and has litigated in international courts and forums. And we're talking about the ICC, the International Criminal Court, and the speculation and some of the reports that they are preparing imminent indictment and arrest of Israeli leaders, potentially including Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and how they could have jurisdiction. But this raises a bigger question, Mike, about globalism and about the ability for nations and nation states to cede their sovereignty through these types of treaties and allow for a non-self governing entity to then adjudicate disputes that these nations may be a party to. Now, in the leftist framework, they probably want, one singular international criminal court that everyone can be held accountable to under their vague type of terminology. But really, I mean, the entire point of the American experiment and the American worldview of justice and law and order is to say that we self-govern, we adjudicate our own disputes, we hold our own leaders accountable through impeachment processes, for example, or what the Supreme Court is determining about presidential immunity. Can a president be held liable in a criminal court setting? These are all questions that we as Americans should answer for ourselves. So where are the fault lines here and the arguments from a signatory onto these types of treaties versus the whole premise of self-governance?
Well, you're right, Jenna. That is the very foundation of the American idea that we are a self-governing people, that we decide for ourselves what crimes are. We do that at the state level primarily, although the federal government has decided to get itself very involved in criminal law and expanding its scope of authority, which is troubling in and of itself. But we're talking about internationalism and globalism, and there's clearly a movement that would seek to attempt a one world government. I mean, look, let's just talk about it. People talk about the New World Order, one world government. I mean, there is definitely a group that would like to see that. The United Nations as the legislative body making the laws through treaties, an international court. There was a movement to create a permanent international court. There is the International Court of Justice, which adjudicates disputes among states, but now we have an international criminal court. Once you build the foundation and the institutions, you just start expanding them. And that is troubling because different groups of people have different ideas about what is crime and what is not. And we should reserve these crimes against humanity, these genocides, these crimes of aggression for only the most extreme cases. I mean, I'm not saying the ICC is totally illegitimate, but it should not be going out and prosecuting leaders of countries who are trying to defend themselves. And as a nation, we need to be very careful about the treaties that we enter into. And this shows how those treaties can be misused. I mean, look, in America, people have tried to use war crimes to go against George Bush, Norman Schwarzkopf, Alberto Gonzalez. I mean, clearly there are attempts by people to use these to go after their political enemies. And we see that now with the Trump cases. So we have to be very careful about criminal law and just letting anyone engage in the criminal process and the prosecution process. And Article 6 of our Constitution makes treaties the law of the land. And we talked about that over the years. And that's something that we need to be very careful about.
Yeah, and I think to your point to Article 6 and that reference, a lot of people are not aware of the potential danger for kind of backdooring in these types of treaties to then not only govern American policy and adjudications in a court setting, but really ceding our national sovereignty and our ability to self-adjudicate to some of these international forums. So explain a little bit more about how that works and the problems that are implicit there that, as you've mentioned before, I don't think the founders intended.
Not at all. When this country was founded, international law was pretty straightforward. It was just agreements between nations, and it was based on very limited rules of international law. And since 1950, treaties have proliferated and are being used by activists and people who would like to get rid of borders and impose, kind of a more globalist, world order to erode national sovereignty. But Article 6 of our Constitution makes treaties ratified by the Senate the law of the land, second only to the Constitution itself, equal to federal law. And because we have an independent judiciary, when the Senate ratifies treaties, sometimes those judges can try to import international law norms or principles into our legal system, which is very concerning. And I've seen it happen in a couple of instances with respect to the Hague Convention. We can talk about that in more detail another time, but it is happening. It does happen, and there are judges who want to do that. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court has put a line in the sand saying, look, there are two kinds of treaties, self-executing, non-self-executing. It holds that most treaties are non-self-executing, which means that the legislature, even past ratification by the Senate, either the Congress or state legislatures still have to take action to legislatively implement treaties. But, we've come a long way from 1776. And, unfortunately, I'm afraid we're not winning this battle. We need to push back.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is another really important point against globalism. And as you've mentioned, Mike, that the ability to self govern depends on our ability to have our rule of law and only be subject to the authorities here in America and not importing other adjudicatory bodies or other sorts of accountability mechanisms that would govern the United States and our ability for our own government to do its job. I mean, there's so many people who are saying that a globalist society would be so much better, but listen, if you don't like the laws in the United States of America, you can move and you can be under a different jurisdiction, a different federal headship. If you don't like that, you can come to the United States legally, not not as these so-called newcomers, but you can immigrate through the process. And so for these people who suggest that globalism and this kind of one world government is a good thing, I think they're failing to see the collateral consequences of how we would be ceding our ability to govern ourselves.
Totally agree with you. I mean, that is the basis of our American republic, self-governance at the local level. We only give enumerated powers to the federal government, and you can see in our own experience what has happened. We gave enumerated powers, specific limited powers to the federal government, and what has happened over time. It has expanded beyond its boundaries to a point where the founders would find it unrecognizable. We have a lot of work to do here, and we certainly don't need unelected or appointed, people from other countries telling us how we should govern ourselves. Well, I don't know. Well, how are we doing? Maybe we need some help. I'm not sure where we turn to, though, frankly.
Well, I think we need to make it smaller and go back to the idea of federalism and be accountable to like the state and local level, not just expand beyond the swamp and then go to some international court. I mean, you think it's hard to get a hold of your senator or somebody in Washington? What if it's a call center over in Poland? I mean, this would be even worse. But Mike Donnelly, these questions are so important. We need to always be looking at these types of headlines through a lens of conservatism, understanding American values and principles, and this is why understanding our U.S. Constitution is so important. And I'm very grateful for your expertise here. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Well, friends, you might have heard that Mike Lindell and MyPillow no longer have the support of their box stores or shopping channels the way that they used to. They've been part of this cancel culture, so they want to pass along the savings directly to you by having a $25 extravaganza. I love that word, extravaganza. When Mike started MyPillow, it was just a one-product company. With the help of his dedicated employees, they now have hundreds of products, some you may not even know about. To get the word out, I want to invite my listeners to check out their $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows are just $25. MyPillow sandals, also awesome, only $25. Their 6-pack towel sets are $25. And brand new 4-pack dish towels, you guessed it, just $25. For the first time ever, the premium MyPillows with the all-new Giza fabric, just $25. And orders over $75 will receive free shipping too. This amazing offer won't last long. Go to mypillow.com, use the promo code Jenna, or call 800-564-8475 today. That's 800-564-8475, or go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Jenna. Well, amid all of the debates on pro-life versus abortion on demand, this headline is coming from the Catholic news agency that says the U.S. birth and fertility rates dropped to record lows, according to the CDC report. It says provisional data published by the CDC this week show that the fertility rate in the United States hit a record low. And total number of births in the country was the lowest that it's been in decades. According to the report, slightly fewer than 3.6 million babies were born in 2023, or 54.4 births per 1,000 women aged 15 through 44. This was a 2% decline in total births and a 3% decline in births per 1,000 women when compared with the previous year. The total fertility rate, which estimates how many children an average woman would have over the course of her life based on the yearly data, was just over 1.6 births per woman, which was a 2% decline from the previous year. This is well below the replacement rate needed to sustain a population, which is about 2.1 births per woman over her life. This was the fewest number of babies born in the United States in a year since 1979, and the lowest fertility rate recorded in American history, just under the previous record lows set in 2020. Walker Wildmon is the vice president of the American Family Association, where I also host Jenna Ellis in the morning from 8 to 9 Eastern on the American Family Radio Network. So, Walker, this is a pretty disturbing trend.
Yeah, this is something, Jenna, that I've been keeping an eye on in recent years. It's kind of nuts and bolts of economics and population health and really national health is what it really signifies, or national decline, which is what we're experiencing in America. So this is something that it might bore people, right? What the birth rate is, but it's very indicative of where we are as a people. And Japan has been dealing with this for some time. China is actually dealing with population decline. Some Eastern European nations have dealt with this. Hungary has had to address this. So this is something to keep an eye on. It's not surprising, though, when you look at the state of our culture, the state of morality in America. Having babies isn't the fancy thing to do, right? People want to go on vacation. They want to wait and get married until they're in their 30s, or not get married at all. And then when they do get married, they may want to have like one or two kids, and then my point is that the emphasis on marriage and family has really taken a hit in recent decades, and this declining birth rate is showing that. So this is something that our nation's going to have to address. And this isn't just a Christian issue or a moral issue. This really implicates our nation's financial and fiscal future when it comes to who's contributing to Social Security. I mean, this has broad implications down the road, and I think our nation's leaders are going to have to address it.
Yeah, and you're so right, Walker, that this really is a worldview and cultural issue, because we've even seen the rise of this phenomenon of the dinks, or the dual income no kids, and the rise of kind of this vanity parent, where we've commoditized children to say that, well, it's the same thing if you want to have a kid versus a fur baby, or or a cat, and there's really no difference. It's all about you as the adult, and these are basically pleasures or hobbies or things that you can or can't participate in just at your pleasure. And that's not at all what the model of the moral family unit is based on. And that's certainly not something that ultimately is in the best interest of America long term.
Yeah, that's right. And look, parenting, I'm a dad of 4, and my wife's got one coming in October, so we'll be at 5 in October. But the marriage and family subject, of course, parenting, the point I was wanting to get at is that parenting is no easy task, right? It's not for the faint-hearted, but the rewards are tremendous here. And that's what, as a society, we can't forget, is the rewards of having and raising children. I mean, it's a beautiful thing. And the most paternal and maternal instincts is to have your family name and your family legacy live on for generations to come. I mean, that's such a natural thing, right? To have children and grandchildren and tell about your family's history. I mean, this is like biology and family 101. So we've got to continue emphasizing that in our country, that marriage and family is a good thing. It's a noble thing. It's a virtuous thing. But not just that, it's also essential to the health and well-being of a nation. And if we keep going down this path of not having replacement levels, it's going to prove very problematic from a fiscal standpoint in our nation when it comes to Social Security, Medicare, who's contributing, the workforce size. All of this is going to come into play for the next 10 and 20 years.
Yeah, and we're seeing that the replacement is really from foreigners, and all of these, the Democrats would like to call them the newcomers, but really it's the illegal aliens that are now coming in. And the one statistic that I was listening to the other day said that under just Joe Biden's presidency, we have had about a 2% increase overall in America's population, and more than the populations of about 36 individual states, which really shows what the ultimate agenda is, which is a replacement theory of America as a whole, and not replacing it with our own kids, and to pass on our own values in the traditions and the history of the American experiment that was built on the Judeo-Christian worldview, but really to replace this with illegal immigrants, with other foreign ideas, and really a trend toward a globalist society. And so if we're looking at all of these things put together, this isn't just an isolated statistic about the birth rate. This shows the trend of a globalist agenda that the Biden administration is certainly playing hand in hand to. So what should conservatives really do about this?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of welfare and big government. I think that's a problem. But I do think that our nation's policy leaders are going to have to address this from a policy standpoint. Look, Hungary's done this. Hungary came to the realization that if we don't start having babies, there's going to be no Hungary in 100 years. There's going to be nobody here, nobody left. So our nation's leaders are going to have to address this from the policy level to encourage marriage and to encourage people to have 2, 3, 4 children so that we can have an America in 100 or 200 years from now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well said. And what the Biden administration, and I think it's been very clear, even if they're not explicit about it, the whole idea behind their policy is that we have a more globalist and a diverse society, and to replace Americans with outsiders, and to really completely destroy our demographics from within. This is the entire point of even co-parenting with the government, which is a ridiculous ideal. So conservatives need to have not just marriage and family as policy or religious preferences, but see how this implicates so many other things, including the very population of America. So Walker, really appreciate your time. We'll be right back with more here on Jenna Ellis Tonight. Throughout history, there are clear moments that define our nation's path, and now you can own a piece of that history. I'm thrilled to announce the official Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin from our friends at Legacy Precious Metals in partnership with Speaker Gingrich. This limited edition 1 ounce 99.99% silver coin commemorates the historic victory in 1994 when the Republican Party, under Speaker Gingrich's guidance, took control of Congress. The Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin also symbolizes the transformative political platform that led to the landmark achievements like the overhaul of the U.S. welfare system and the Balanced Budget Act. This is a limited edition coin that will sell out. So whether you're looking for the perfect gift or you want to own a piece of history, act fast before they run out. The Newt Gingrich contract with America.Coin is more than an investment. It's a tribute to honest government and America. You can order it online at newtgingrichsilvercoin.com. That's newtgingrichsilvercoin.com, and use promo code Jenna, that's JENNA, to get $10 off your purchase. Go to newtgingrichsilvercoin.com now. As the Trump trial in New York City enters its third week, the judge has held Donald Trump in contempt of court earlier today for violating a gag order. Apparently, the judge has issued a contempt of court for 9 different instances and fined Trump $9,000. This also coming as the judge is refusing to allow for expert testimony on issues related to campaign finance. And I thought that this was a campaign finance related trial. So wouldn't that have been relevant? Well, this is what attorney Harmeet Dillon had to say to Megyn Kelly on that issue.
So it is actually an open and shut case. And what the judge did in this case, Judge Merchant, is outrageous. He has prevented President Trump from bringing in campaign finance experts who would have advised the court that there is no campaign finance violation here. This is the most biased of absolutely. And my God, we have limited time here, but I could go on of the number of reversible errors this judge has committed. That is but one of many. And,
Joining me now is Will Chamberlain, who is senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. So, Will, is Hermit right that this judge is just a total left-wing biased judge in both this decision, apparently other reversible errors, and now with finding contempt of court on the gag order that I think is actually unconstitutional?
Right. I don't necessarily think the contempt of court findings are the problem so much as the initial gag order is the problem, right? Like the
Right.
gag order is unconstitutional. It restrains President Trump's ability to speak and defend himself from political attacks and from a biased prosecution. Now, my understanding of the way the gag order works is that Trump very likely violated that gag order. But the problem is, so again, the problem is not the analysis of did he or did he not violate this unconstitutional order. It is the unconstitutional order itself.
Right. And I think that, that is the underlying probably appeal here, is to say, can you be held in contempt for violating an unconstitutional order to begin with? Because I think there's pretty much no question. We all saw this one coming, and even Trump himself going on and saying, throw me in jail, I'll become the next Nelson Mandela. And I don't really think that's particularly wise of him, but that's the course of action he's taking because he thinks probably that this is playing well in the court of public opinion. But let's talk also about this finding from the judge of not allowing any expert testimony from Team Trump related to campaign finance experts. Why would he hold such a ruling if this really goes to the heart of Trump's defense?
Yeah, I mean, because the prosecutors are bringing this very bizarre criminal theory, which is that not only did Donald Trump falsify his records when he was the victim of Michael Avenatti's blackmail, but that doing so itself was a campaign finance violation. And that's a key part of transforming this from a misdemeanor into a felony, is arguing that the falsification was in service of another crime. That makes whether or not that other crime was committed a key element of the case, and something that both the judge and the jury need to understand, that it's something the jury will actually have to find, that he did this in service of another crime. So if he's not allowing expert testimony on the question of whether or not this was actually a campaign finance violation, even if everything the prosecutors say is true, that seems like a very, very clear and obvious reversible error, as Harmeet explained.
Yeah, and what's really frustrating, I think, about this entire case is it seems like everyone, hopefully not the jury, but it seems like everybody else has already made up their mind of Trump's guilt or not guilt based on their political affiliation or whether they like Trump individually or not. And that is not how this is supposed to work. And it's been fascinating to me, Will, kind of watching this now into its third week, that, the headlines this morning saying that Trump's now been held in contempt of court for violating this gag order. I mean, that got pretty decent headlines and some coverage, but the trial overall has not gotten a lot of the national and worldwide headlines day to day as much as I anticipated, frankly, and not nearly as much as when this indictment first came out in August of last year. Do you attribute that more to just fatigue, everybody already kind of making up their minds, and so they're just waiting to see the inevitable conclusion, or maybe something else?
I think I just attribute it to lack of video. In other trials that we've had and other court proceedings, for example, in Georgia, there's video constantly streaming, and so people can clip it easily when there's a big moment. Keeping the trial off of film has made it so like little things can't really go viral, minor events can't really be followed. So it's sort of like we didn't see a lot of coverage of the Engoron trial while it was going on, even though that led to this dramatic outcome of a $500 million judgment against President Trump. So I think the sole reason this isn't getting as much attention as other proceedings is the lack of video.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting point, and I think is, to me, actually a really good argument for keeping video out of court so that we're not kind of live streaming this sort of let's all be our own individual court of public opinion jurors, and keeping the proceedings hopefully with a modicum of dignity, but not having this just a public spectacle. But that cuts both ways, and certainly for President Trump, I would think that given the fact that this is so political and he's made this a campaign issue and the fact that he can't campaign, he might prefer that there is video.
Yeah, I mean, I think President Trump would certainly prefer more transparency here, especially given the nature of this trial and how bizarre the allegations are. It would allow a lot more flexible commentary, not just on the general happenings in the trial, but actually specific rulings the judge is making or specific arguments that the prosecution is putting forward and letting legal analysts dissect it more easily. Because right now we're at the mercy of whatever gets reported out by the reporters that actually attend the trial in person, and they don't have a recorded transcript. Like they're taking notes. And so it's
Right.
a lot
So we're
harder
kind of
to do.
relying on a little bit of, kind of this third hand information and just whatever they determine is newsworthy rather than, being able to parse that for ourselves. And, so that's an argument maybe in favor of some video. I personally love that we can now live stream at least the audio of Supreme Court arguments. It used to be that we had to wait until they were all published the next Friday, which I'm thinking if it's just the audio and you're like, why wouldn't they have been live streaming it anyway? I think that's actually a very good thing to be able to hear it contemporaneously, not have to physically be in the courtroom. But this is into the third week of trial, and a lot of people who aren't necessarily familiar with this type of high profile litigation and trial thought, how can this possibly be a 6 to 8 week trial? But with only the number of witnesses so far, not very many, I can see this easily stretching into 6 or 8 weeks. How does that impact Trump's campaign?
I mean, it changes the campaign he has to run. And I mean, he's been running it this way. He doesn't get to, and we sort of knew that this would be a potential problem back during last year in the primary, is that the potential of any one of these trials happening before the election means he's stuck in a defendant's chair for a lengthy period of time. And that's the case here. Now, whether that actually hurts him, it's not clear that it hurts him, especially in this New York case where nobody really seems to be taking it that seriously outside of the hard Democratic left. Everybody else just sort of
I think everybody has made up their
it.
mind, right? I mean, everybody's made up their mind depending on whether they love or hate Trump. But we'll be back with more with Will Chamberlain right after this. And we're back with Will Chamberlain, who is senior counsel for the Article 3 Project. And Will, I also want to get your take on another story, this coming from ABC News about Trump meeting with Governor DeSantis over the weekend. So the headline is Trump and DeSantis meet to, quote, bury the hatchet after 2024 primary fight, sources say. Florida's governor has signaled he plans to fundraise for his former rival. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis met privately with former President Donald Trump in Miami on Sunday morning, multiple sources tell ABC News, making the latest development in the pair's rocky relationship following a contentious GOP primary in which Trump won out over DeSantis. DeSantis requested the meeting with Trump through a mutual contact, hoping to, quote, bury the hatchet, according to one source familiar with the interaction. And then, of course, Donald Trump also went on to post on Truth Social and basically affirm, this story. And Ron DeSantis is going to fundraise for Trump and all the way down ticket on GOP. I think this is a great thing. It's good overall for the ticket for the party, but there's now speculation as well that DeSantis may be in consideration for the VP slot. I don't really buy that for multiple reasons. One, just a 12th Amendment analysis. They can't be from the same state. Trump isn't going to go back to New York, clearly. But then also, Trump is the only alpha in the room. He's not going to have a second who's also an alpha. So what do you make of this story, Will?
Yeah, I think one, it's obviously a very positive story for the Republican Party. It's very good for two of the leading lights to be cooperating rather than having their camps sniping at each other. And there hasn't been a lot of that in the last month or so, but there was a period right after the primary ended where there was a lot of sniping back and forth that wasn't productive. I mean, Governor DeSantis endorsed Donald Trump, so we should all be on the same page together. And we don't want Trump alienating DeSantis voters. We want those people staying in the camp. They're both natural allies in the sense they're both part of the same wing of the party. They're both part of the America First wing. So it's good to see them supporting each other. I think it also just makes sense in terms of their personal interests. Trump doesn't benefit from antagonizing DeSantis supporters, and money is an issue, obviously, because of all these trials going on. And so there's a strain overall on campaign-related finances. And it's not good for DeSantis to have the leader of the party not be, publicly insulting you. That's not a good thing. So in general, I think both parties had it in their self-interest to bury the hatchet and start working together. And it's really good to see that they are. Now, I don't think DeSantis will end up being the vice president for the reason you mentioned. I also don't think DeSantis particularly wants it. He's already the governor of Florida still until early 2027, which was coincidentally right around the time that the 2028 presidential race will kick off. So he doesn't need to be vice president to build his profile or anything like that. And I think that he'd rather stay in his position as governor of Florida and continue to be able to do really, really good work as the governor of Florida. And I mean, if you've seen a bunch of the legislation he signed, a bunch of the action he's taken lately, he's been doing absolutely a great job in continuing the record that he built up before he ran for president.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that overall, that as you said, Will, this is good for the party, and I think that no one will care among the general voting base that Trump and DeSantis were primary rivals. Now, you and I both supported DeSantis in the primary, and and we are, for better or for worse, prolific consumers of online social media content and some of those things. So saw kind of the depth of the sniping back and forth, and it seems to me that the only people who are still concerned about this kind of rivalry are the social media influencers that maybe benefit from the clicks and the likes and the drama. But the wider GOP base is just sort of like, let's go after Biden. We don't really care about these sort of intramural squabbles. So how much of a percentage do you think of these social media influencers may continue trying to raise that drama, even if it's against where Trump and DeSantis have already kind of abandoned that ground?
I mean, there are a few who are going to try, because one lesson of social media is that it's hard to keep your audience doing anything other than what you did to build that audience. So there's certain people who, on both sides, right, who made their name as, I am a pro-DeSantis influencer, or I am a pro-Trump, anti-DeSantis influencer. And if that's how they built their audience, it's like they don't know anything else to do. So they feel like a need to keep doing what got them their followers in the first place. But and that's a very online phenomena. And when you talk to normal Republicans, they just don't care, as you say. Like there are people who have like personal investments in the fight between the two candidates on both sides, but those people just don't reflect. Not only do they not reflect the desires of Republican voters, they don't reflect the actual desires of the candidates themselves. They don't, as we just saw, DeSantis and Trump met and saw mutual interest in working together. And so you have this very, very small minority of Twitter people on either side trying to stoke the flames of the fight that literally no one else wants.
Yeah, and it is really unfortunate, as you say, that people who build a brand just in a certain vein and with either extreme fidelity to one politician or hatred of another, then can't kind of get out of that mold, because that's how they built their brand, which is why I've always built my brand on Christianity, on truth, and on conservatism, not for or against any specific politician, but being principled. And that's a very good thing. And it's interesting to see how so many people are shocked and outraged when, like, I say something consistent with that is against their frame or what they think I should be saying. But I don't really care. And, the haters are what they are. But social media is an interesting phenomenon. But in just the last couple of minutes I have with you, Will, and in the program, so where does Trump go with the VP as well? Because now I think Kristi Noem is completely out of it. I mean, that story to me that came out in her book, in her memoir, about shooting her dog in the face was just politically so damaging. I don't think that she can or should recover from that.
Yeah, she has no chance. I've heard rumblings about Doug Burgum, who I actually think would be a very reasonable pick. He's a very competent guy, billionaire, ran a software company, but a very, a solid conservative in his own right, has governed North Dakota very well, and wouldn't outstage Trump. So that's one option. There's a lot of other people.
Ben Carson?
I'm not a huge
because I
Ben
think
Carson guy. I think he's been out of the game for too long. I don't see him as being as effective in the event he needed to be president, right? That's actually an important part of this, is like, would the guy be a good president? And I don't know that Ben Carson really has the chops. And he's been out of like the political world for a few years now. Doesn't hold active political office. Like, nice guy, I'm sure, but I don't see administrative talent, I guess, would be the key thing there.
Well, definitely better than Kamala Harris, who has no talent whatsoever other than cackling. But it's going to be it's going to be very interesting to see when Trump announces his VP pick as well, because Biden clearly has, and also RFK Jr. But Will Chamberlain, really appreciate it. That's all the time that we have for Jenna Ellis tonight, and I'll see you tomorrow night.